Empire.
That was a gut punch. Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Conn Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget you can read my work on ESPN.com. And a programming note, Bram Weinstein, the voice of Commanders, and I will be doing a live stream show on this abbreviated week at Tuesday night, 7:30 Eastern Time. Join us there. Going to be a lot to talk about from the Commanders' 28-27 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'll be honest, folks, it's not all bad because the Commanders continue to show that they are a good team. But today, they just came up short, and there are a lot of reasons for that. And there are little things that you can learn going forward for them to kind of avoid being in this situation. However, let's take you inside the locker room first, because I think this was a very wounded locker room. And one of the things, everything with this kind of game is how do you respond to that? So if you remember last year, they went up to Philadelphia. They played a good game against the Eagles, and they have a Thursday night game against the Bears coming up, a chance to grab some momentum, and they laid a massive egg on national TV. I do not think this team will respond that way. This is such a different team, such a better coach team, such a team that's in way better spot mentally. Last year, I think at that point, they kind of knew like maybe it's not going to happen here. What you heard from these guys time and time again is they still think they're a special team, and I don't think you can disagree with that, even though it was a loss today. There were, and this is not a moral victory, but I think you went toe-to-toe with a really good team, and certainly had a chance to win at the end. And if you make some plays, that can make the difference in the game. So there's a lot to learn here, but I think what you also learn is just how much winning matters to this team, because there were wounded voices in that locker room. It was a very quiet locker room, as you would expect, but I think it also speaks to the bond that this team has. I'm not trying to spin this in some sort of positive way, because, again, there are issues I'm going to get to in a minute. But one thing I would say is they did not play their best game. And I think if they had played their best game and lost like this, and you say, oh, maybe that's as well as they could play. I think you come away from this game saying they didn't play their best. There's more that they could have done to put themselves in a better spot. And, this is a game. These are two teams that were pretty evenly matched. And I think that's the takeaway from me from this. They just came up short. Anyways, so I think you going inside the locker room, Sam Cosmi. Cosmi is not a vocal leader. He is a strong leader. He's a good person to talk to. I always enjoy talking to him. I think he has good insight, but he's not a guy who gets up in front of the team. Well, he did that after today. He wanted to make sure he got up in front of the team to talk about how not to make this game have a snowball effect, and just to basically keep going. And yes, let it sting. It should sting. This loss should sting. Dan Quinn said the same thing, but don't let it bleed into another game. And as he said, Philadelphia is going to be facing a pretty pissed off team, because like this one, if you use it right, you can then go out and play, maybe get what you want against the Eagles. And the other thing is, like, we asked him, like, why did you feel the need to do this? And it's because he said because of the faith he has in this team. That's why he wanted to get up and talk to them, because of what he believes this team is capable of and the bond that they have. And I think what they reminded each other today is, that this is something like, again, this bond they have matters to one another. And even Benjamin St. Juste, and I'll get to him in a minute, but even he was saying, like, they believe that they still are a special team. They can do special things. This loss does not deter them. And I think that's the one thing to take from this is they don't look at this like, some shattering loss. Listen, man, even if they go out and lose a Philly, I think they're still going to go into December or go into their bye in a couple of weeks with a 9-4 record. That's how the schedule breaks, and in a really good spot. But I think that this team is so much stronger mentally that I wouldn't put anything past them on Thursday playing against a really good Philly team. But this is a really good Washington team. The hard part is how banged up will they be for that game? And follow us throughout the week, and we'll answer that question, because they are dealing with some situations for sure. So, but again, I asked Cosmi, we're talking about, like, I brought up that Bears game last year after the Philly game. Well, in that Philly game, they actually played pretty well from offensively, not defensively, but offensively they did. And so, like, was that the start of something? Well, it turns out it was not. It was a mirage. But I think this is a continuation of who they are. And I asked Dan Quinn if he learned anything. He said he didn't learn anything. It was just more once again seeing what this team he believes is. That's a good physical football team. That's what they showed. You just got to make more plays when they were. The other problem is the two words you look at this game is wasted chances, a lot of wasted chances. And I think that's a key takeaway from this game, that if you take advantage of one or two of those opportunities, this game could have ended differently, even at the end there. So the messaging, I think, for this week is good. One of the things I like about Dan Quinn as a coach is he takes on the situation. He embraces the situation. This loss stings, let it suck for 24 hours and move on to Philadelphia. That's the only way you can approach it, because you have to acknowledge that, yes, this stings and it stinks, but you still have a game to get ready for right away. The quicker you can flush this, the better off you'll be for that game in Philadelphia. And that's all you have to do. And the other thing that these guys talk about is having each other's backs. You have that situation, and he didn't handle it well. And now he did not cost him the game. He just cost him a chance to get the ball back. But the Steelers most certainly were going to punt, even though Mike Tomlin said he wasn't going to tell. The other players there were telling reporters that, yes, they were going to punt. But in that situation, you got to be disciplined. You've got to understand the situation. They're going to try and draw you off sides. Don't jump. But while he's being interviewed, Jaden Daniels walks by, gives him a high five. It's about having each other's backs. Like that's a takeaway from the locker room after this game. And I think, listen, this is a good team. That's another takeaway. They were toe-to-toe with the Steelers, who are a very well-coached, very good team and have been for a long time. So that's a good thing. Now, it's not, again, you cannot take moral victories. I'm not suggesting that you should look at it like that they should look at it like that. But I like the way this team has responded all year to situations. And I like what you saw and heard after the game in the locker room. And again, if they had played their best, then I think you could say, because the Steelers, I mean, they did a good job against the Steelers too, but Russell Wilson wasn't always as accurate, except for a couple throws that were very timely. But then you could have looked at that and say, well, Washington played their best and they still couldn't do it. Well, they did not play their best. And I think there were certain things that you saw from Jaden Daniels that we hadn't seen before, but I give a lot of credit to what the Steelers did to cause some of those issues. There was no Brian Robinson. Then in pregame, you have Andrew Wiley. He had the shoulder injury. They worked him out for a little while, and he could not play. Now, he was still active. He was an emergency tackle situation in case something happened with Trent Scott. Trent Scott had to go in. They worked Wiley out a while, and what we saw is like Wiley walking down the field, talking to Dan Quinn for a few minutes, and you kind of knew like that's not a good sign. And then he was active, and then you find out he's not going to start. So you had to go in there with a backup right tackle. And with Cornelius Lucas out, you're really going with your fourth tackle against TJ Watt. So there were a few things that were working against them for sure that did not help. And as far as for Thursday goes, we don't know the status. I don't know for Brian Robinson. We'll find out later. Wiley, same thing. And then also Marshawn Lattimore. I would still be surprised if Lattimore plays against the Eagles, just because I think it's a lot to ask to come to a new team and have you. I don't know that he's let it loose, so to speak, in practice, and this isn't going to be a good week to do that. So I think for him, get him ready for that stretch run, get him ready for 2 weeks against Dallas, and then go from there and all that. Now, I will say this is absolutely a game they could have used Marshawn Lattimore, because the Steelers addition of Mike Williams made a difference in this game. If Marshawn Lattimore is out there, he'd have made a difference in this game too, especially on a play like that, in that kind of situation. So that's what I would have looked for him to be on a guy like that. Williams is great at contested catches. Marshawn Lattimore is great at defending those. And I just think the whole play goes differently, but he wasn't out there. But that's a guy that's why I say when you look at this game, there's going to be improvements Washington can make simply because they get the guy in Lattimore that makes a big difference on that defense. And we see that they need a top corner in the worst way. So the other thing is on that, and this is just a little aside, on that last spot to Zach Ertz, it was a horrible spot. Like, I don't know what the officials did, but they marked him at the 42-yard line. There's no chance in hell that he was at the 42-yard line. I think you can, if you look at it like it's you could make a case one way or another that he got the first down or didn't. And my guess is whichever the way they called it on the field, it would have stood, but there's no chance in hell that he was at the 42-yard line. That was a terrible, terrible, terrible spot. And again, when I'm watching it, you could easily make a case that he had the first down. So let me know what you guys think in the comments on YouTube. But I think you're going to agree with me on that for sure. But it was very, very close. Regardless, putting at the 42 was ridiculous. With Jaden Daniels, first time I think we've seen him be quote unquote human. Kid's really good, and it's not like he played a bad game. He just wasn't the same Jaden Daniels that we have seen throughout the first part of the season. But again, I give a lot of credit to the Steelers. They did a good job. They took away his legs. I think he had, let's see what he have here. He rushed 3 times for 5 yards. He had he was unable to really extend plays and get outside the pocket. The Steelers used a 5-man rush 19 times a day. That's by far their season high. The previous season high was last week against the Giants, 11, or the last game against the Giants, 11 times. Jaden Daniels was 7 for 16 in those situations. I think what it also did is it prevented him from finding a crease or a pocket in that pass rush, and that took away a weapon for Washington. It's funny because going into this game, Pittsburgh's defense is really good, but I also felt like, hey, they haven't seen an offense this good with a quarterback this multidimensional. Well, Mike Tomlin's 25 and 6. He's now 26 and 6 against rookie quarterbacks for a reason. He knows how to design defenses. He knows how to scheme up things. And I don't feel like Jaden Daniels looked like a rookie per se. I just think that they were able to take away a major attribute that he has, and that's that ability to get outside, make plays, whether it's throwing, running, whatever. And his legs just weren't a factor today, really for the first time this season that a team has been able to do that. I don't think you're going to see a team that can do that the rest of the season, right? And so I'll be curious to see, we'll see what Philly does, but I think this is the best defense they'll face. And they still, had a chance at the end there, but their ends were getting upfield, but they were able to get upfield. Like they could, usually with a guy like that, with Daniels, 7.5 yards or so cut inside for the defensive ends, they were going 8-9 yards upfield and turning in, but they could do that because the tackles were getting enough penetration that there just weren't any creases. And again, when you're sending 5, then you're taking away more of those opportunities for him to get outside and do it. And that was just a really good job, I think, by the Steelers being able to do that. So, and I just don't like the pass game was kind of off all game, and credit the Steelers. Like there were a lot of tight window throws that Daniels had to make. And there were some times where it's like, there was one time on a 3rd down, I think in 14 to Noah Brown, it sometimes looks like, well, the window is so narrow that is he throwing the ball? Daniels was just a little bit off, but on plays like that, is he off because he's expecting Brown to sit in that zone coverage, or is he off because he just was off? Sometimes it was looked like he was a little bit rushed, understandably. But in a situation like that, I think that one may have been where maybe he was expecting Brown to sit because the way the safety was coming over, he's going to get destroyed if he continues on his path. It was just off a little bit. And then, I think what would have been really good for this team is if they had won with Daniels having a quote unquote off game, because I think the fact they're in this game like that still says something about who they are and what they can do. Jaden did not have his all world game. He did not have the game where you say, oh, that's an MVP candidate. Now I think he can still clearly getting back in that race for sure. I mean, he's that good, but this was not that game where you saw that yet. They still had that chance at the end, and there were still a couple plays that could have been made where it's like you make that play and you're right there, or you win the game. On the deep one to McCaffrey, just misses him. And I will say this, like McCaffrey continues to get open every game. Every game there's a play where you say, oh, if they get it to him here, that's a big gain. Sometimes he's not in the progression. Sometimes maybe you don't see it because maybe there's a scramble. Sometimes you just miss it. Today they missed him. Daniels misses him on the throw. Maybe get a little bit more air under there. Just misses it. That's a big play from their own end zone. Changes the game because you're up by 6 by that point. Changes the game. Whether you score a touchdown or not on that throw, you're going to be probably in field goal range. It changes the game. That's how close they were in this one to really pulling it out. There were a couple other times where on the one to Zacchaeus, you complete that ball and he's probably inside the 30. Well, you end up punting on that drive. So that's another one where it's just a little bit wide. And I think some people thought he dropped it. Well, he only had one hand on the ball. So I don't think he had any chance at that one, a wide throw, but I think that was a hurried throw. So that's what the Steelers rush does, man. Like they don't rank in the top half in sacks, but that defensive line gets after you in a great, great way. And so you always have to be cognizant of that as a quarterback. I think it can mess with you too. And I think in some of those situations, I think, whether it messed with him or not, I don't know, but it certainly looked like there were some hurried throws that he normally normally those are layups for him. And today they weren't, and that happens. But, I think Jay Daniels has been pretty damn good. And I still think there were some throws today we make like, oh my God, that's a great throw. So the couple of the ones that Terry McLaurin, really, really damn good throw. And those are still there. And even at the end, again, despite all that, you have a chance to do something and just didn't get it done. But on the last ball, on the ball to Noah Brown, I wondered if he was able to follow through the way he needed to, but that's a tight window throw on that play. You got the safety coming over, you got to get behind the corner, and there's not a whole lot of margin for error. Brown tries to make a good attempt at the ball. But if you get it just out a little bit more, Brown's probably got it. Now you're in field goal range. So that close, folks, that close. And those are like knowing Jaden Daniels, like those are the plays that are going to kind of bother him depending on how. The other thing is like, we don't know all the answers to all why the plays went wrong, but I do think those are the kind of plays that would eat at him a little bit, just knowing what kind of competitor he is and what he puts on himself. He's not the kind of guy who only wants to hear good things or he'll crack. No, he wants to know what he did wrong so he can get better at that. And I think in that case, it may have been as simple as could he follow through the way and drive the ball the way he needed to. He also was, you also wonder about the effects of the rib. You wonder about, we heard it hit his hand on a play where maybe that affects it too. I don't know, but that close. Then you had, you just had some other plays that were just weird. And then you have Zacchaeus, the two muff punts. And Jamison Crowder was here for a reason this summer. This is why. The number one thing for a punt returner is to secure the ball. It's not about how many guys you make miss. Secure the ball, then make the first guy miss. That's the only job, right? But everything starts with secure the ball. And he had the two today. I will say, if you remember back in the preseason, I think it may have been the first preseason game where he'd returned some punts. He had some long returns. What concerned me on some of those was just the way he fielded the punts and just they weren't smooth. He didn't look smooth on those. And I think we've seen that. And now I don't know when Crowder's coming back and haven't heard. You still got the hamstring, still on IR with the hamstring. But they need a guy who can just flat out field the ball first, then go. And on the first one, it looked like he was focused more on making the first defender miss coming down rather than catching the ball. He kind of caught the ball up here like this. Not the best way to do it. And it looked like he was making his move before he secured the ball for sure. So that's when, okay, you don't learn that, right? Well, the next one, he runs up, misjudges it, hits off his chest. But that was brutal because the first one he recovers, the second one he doesn't, leads to a touchdown. So that one was a killer. Now that was, I guess you could say it was kind of offset by Pittsburgh dropping a fake punt throw on the play where they were blitzing the gunner to try and block the punt, or rushing the gunner. And the guy was wide open, just dropped it. So they both had mistakes on special teams that cost them points. But you've got to do a better job securing the ball. And that's why Crowder's here. You had Benjamin St. Juste, and in that last one, this is where Lattimore can help you. And that's the guy that's going to be in that situation once he's healthy. And that's what they need. That dude is going to be, as they said, he's going to be a dog for them. But in this case, it was still St. Juste. And St. Juste is going to catch a lot of grief from fans. And there are a lot of times he gets a lot of penalties. We all know that. He had the pass interference penalty earlier in the game, wrapping his arms around Freiermuth. You've got to put yourself in a better position to avoid those mistakes. The problem is, and I think St. Juste does a good job communicating what happened, communicating what he needs to learn, but you got to put it into practice. And I think that's where some of the issues have been, is putting those things into practice on a consistent basis. And like the one today, on the touchdown, it's a 3rd down and 9. You make that stop, you get they're probably punting or whatever they're doing. Probably you kick a field goal or maybe going for it, but you put them in a tough spot and you're not giving up the lead. unless they go for it on fourth down. But in that one, like they rushed 5. It looks like he's anticipating the ball coming out quick because he does a flat foot read on Mike Williams, who just got here, and Williams just ran by him. So, and St. Juste lines up a little bit further off than you would like. He was like 8 yards off, but he's right at the sticks. So I think it looks like he's anticipating the ball coming out fast, and you can drive on the ball and make a play that way. But again, he just ran by him. And what he said after the game is like, he has to know that that Russell Wilson likes to throw that fade route, and Mike Williams runs that route well. Now, Williams said he hadn't run that route with the Steelers because he just got here, but it is a route he runs well. He's a 6'4" guy. He's very good at in those contested catch situations. So you have to anticipate what they might do in that situation. And he didn't. And St. Juste didn't come through. And so we know that that's been a theme. We all know that. But again, like in this case, Lattimore is the guy that would be on him in the future. But it happened today, and it's happened a lot. It just highlights again why they needed to go get Lattimore, because if they didn't, then that's going to become an issue throughout the season or the rest of the season for other teams or other big games, whether it's now, whether if they do indeed make the playoffs. But now that you have Lattimore, once he's healthy, you get a guy who can defend those for sure. So that's where you say, okay, bad play, bad loss, or tough loss, but the guy that can stop that is on the roster right now. And it's just, and it's not St. Juste. And there was a 2nd and 16 that he made a tackle on one drive too, but that was not his guy. It was a scramble situation. He was back and he came up to make the play on the guy because he was sending someone behind him. Regardless, there's been a theme for him all year. And it's funny to the point where, if you remember, there was the roughing the passer penalty on the play. St. Juste defends the pass. The first thing he did when he got up is look for the flags. I just think he's that's what's going on. And, like I said, I think he's a smart guy and a smart player, but you got to learn and you got to apply it. And there's just, I think he does a good job being physical. I'll be curious to see what they do when Lattimore gets in there, how they reshuffle that lineup with the corners. I still think you can mix and match because you do have guys that you can put St. Juste on some other guys that are better matchup. And Williams, Mike Evans, those guys are matchups for Marshawn Lattimore. Pickens is a really good player too. And so like they had their struggles with him. And to be honest, I thought the tackling was not as crisp early on, especially, and even at other times in the game. That's something they've been good at, but it wasn't as good today. So just a lot to look at. And, this is a tough one, folks. But I do think there's a lot of good things ahead for this team, even this season. And so nothing today pushes me off that point for sure. So, and then last thing I want to say, and it was kind of a big, I'm reluctant to talk about this, but I did want to. And it was apparently Resh Manuel, shout out to you, discovered it was my 500th game today. And I want to thank the team and everybody, my colleagues, for what they did today. And just so you know, like the team invited my family to be here at this game. That was a major surprise. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, how much I appreciate all of you for reading me all these years, listening to me babble on like this on the podcast, all that support. And it's been my privilege to continue to cover this team and to continue covering this team for ESPN and for you, because one thing I love, folks, is football. And I like talking about football. And it's been fun this year to talk about games that matter. And so that's what's fun. But I really did want to, let you know, like, this is a good organization. And it's a first-class organization. And the way they responded to me and for this, I'm very humbled and very appreciative. And just want to say thanks to you and thanks to them and my colleagues too, because there are a lot of special people in that room that mean a lot to me. And, you can be competitors with people, but you can also have really good friendships with them. And I think we have that in our media room. So anyways, just want to say that. And thank you guys for listening. Tough one. They'll be back Thursday. I think that, like I said, don't get your head down, folks. I'm going to sound like Sam Cosby. Don't get your head down, because I still think this team has a lot of good days ahead of it this season. So that's it for me. I'll be back on Tuesday night. I'll be back on Tuesday with live stream edition with Graham Weinstein, 7:30 Eastern time. May or may not have a game review on Tuesday morning, a very quick one. I don't know about that. Hope to have Tim McManus from the covers the Eagles on, and I'll do my 5 things I think. We'll get to game Thursday, see what happens then. Appreciate it. Talk to you next time.